Princess Zara-Th of the Valkyrian Empire stood before the Grand Council chamber doors, her silver-blue skin pale with exhaustion. The ornate crystalline patterns that marked her royal bloodline had dimmed to barely visible traces along her temples. 3 days had passed since the vote, and still she could barely believe what had happened. The massive doors slid open with a whisper, revealing the circular chamber where 12 of the galaxy's most powerful species had gathered. Representatives from the Thorgon Confederacy, the Silicon Collective, the Aquatic Domains, and 9 other major civilizations sat in judgment. At the center of the room stood a simple podium where she had once commanded respect as the heir to one of the oldest empires in known space. Now she was nothing. Princess Zara-Th, announced Chancellor Morvek of the Thorgon Confederacy, his forearms crossed in formal dismissal. The Council has reviewed your final appeal. The decision remains unchanged. Your father's war crimes cannot be overlooked, and your family's rule over Valkyria Prime and its 17 colonial worlds is hereby terminated. Zara-Th's hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. My father acted to defend our people from the Nexus invasion. Every action he took was to protect innocent lives. By destroying 3 inhabited worlds, hissed the Silicon Collective's representative, its mechanical voice echoing coldly through the chamber. By deploying weapons that turned living planets into ash. Your father's protection killed 40 billion beings. The Nexus would have killed more, Zara-Th replied, her voice breaking slightly. They were consuming everything in their path. We had no choice. There is always a choice, rumbled the massive aquatic domain ambassador, water flowing constantly around its tank. Your father chose genocide. You defended that choice. The Council has spoken. The formal documents were already prepared. With the stroke of energy signatures across quantum-sealed contracts, the Valkyrian Empire ceased to exist. 17 worlds, countless space stations, mining operations, and trade routes that had operated for over 2,000 years were redistributed among the Council members. Zara-Th watched her birthright dissolve before her eyes. You have 48 standard hours to vacate Valkyrian space, Chancellor Morvek continued. Any attempt to rally support among your former subjects will be considered an act of rebellion against the Galactic Council. Where am I supposed to go? The words escaped her before she could stop them, and she hated how small her voice sounded. That is no longer our concern, the Silicon Collective replied. Perhaps one of the frontier worlds will take you. Though I doubt it, given your family's reputation. The chamber began to empty as the representatives filed out, already discussing how to divide her people's assets. Zara-Th remained standing at the podium, watching 20 centuries of her family's legacy crumble into bureaucratic footnotes. Her personal guard, Captain the Wren, appeared at her side. The loyal Valkyrian's own markings were dim with grief. My princess, we must leave. The automated systems are already transferring authority codes. Zara-Th nodded slowly. She had prepared for this possibility, though she had never truly believed it would come to pass. A small ship waited in the docking bay, loaded with what few personal possessions she had been allowed to take. No weapons, no advanced technology, no means of communication with her former subjects. Just basic supplies and enough fuel to reach the nearest neutral station. The journey to Station Omega-7 took 6 days through hyperspace corridors she had once traveled as visiting royalty. Now she was just another refugee with rapidly dwindling credits. The station existed in the buffer zone between civilized space and the lawless frontier regions, serving traders, mercenaries, and others who preferred to avoid official scrutiny. When she disembarked, the reality of her situation truly hit her. No one bowed. No one even recognized her. The few beings who glanced her way saw only another down-on-her-luck alien with fading skin markings and worn clothing. Captain the Wren had stayed with her as long as protocol allowed, but even he had family obligations that required him to seek employment elsewhere. Forgive me, my princess, he had said before departing on a freight hauler. If circumstances ever change. I understand, old friend. Take care of yourself. Now she sat alone in the station's common area, nursing a cup of synthetic nutrition fluid she could barely afford, watching the crowds of successful merchants and confident explorers move past her table. 3 major shipping companies had already refused her application for basic crew positions once they ran her genetic signature through their databases. Word traveled fast in the transportation industry. The Valkyrian Empire had made enemies during the war. Few wanted to risk association with its last surviving member. Her funds would last another week, perhaps two if she found the cheapest accommodations available. After that, she would need to find work or face the very real possibility of starvation. The irony was not lost on her that someone who had once commanded fleets numbering in the thousands now struggled to buy her next meal. "Excuse me, miss. Are you all right?" Zara-Th looked up, startled. A being she had never seen before stood beside her table. It walked upright on two legs like a Valkyrian, but its skin was a strange peachy brown color instead of the blues and silvers she was accustomed to. Most unusual of all, it had only two arms and its face was covered with short, dark fur around the mouth and jaw. "I'm sorry," she replied, uncertain what response was expected. "You just look like you might be having a rough time," the being continued in heavily accented Galactic Standard. "I'm Marcus Chen, from Earth." "Human. And you are?" "Earth." She had heard the name mentioned in trade reports, but knew nothing about it. Some backwards world that had only recently made contact with galactic civilization, if she remembered correctly. "Not a member of the council, certainly." "I'm Zara," she said, dropping her title instinctively. Few beings would react well to learning they were speaking with the daughter of the galaxy's most notorious war criminal. "Mind if I sit?" "It's just that I've been traveling alone for 3 weeks and I'm getting pretty tired of talking to my ship's computer." Despite everything, Zara-Th found herself almost smiling. "Please." Marcus slid into the seat across from her, setting down his own drink. "So what brings you to this lovely corner of nowhere?" "I'm guessing by your expression that it wasn't exactly a vacation choice." For a moment, she considered the careful lies she had been preparing for exactly this type of conversation. But something about this human's direct manner and genuine concern made her hesitate. When had anyone last asked about her well-being without wanting something in return? "My family lost everything in a business dispute," she said finally. It was not entirely untrue, if you considered galactic politics a form of business. "Ah, hostile takeover?" "Something like that." Marcus nodded sympathetically. "That's rough. I've seen it happen to good people back home. Especially the smaller family operations. The big corporations come in and just sweep everything away." They talked for another hour about inconsequential things. Marcus told her about Earth, a world that seemed almost impossibly primitive by galactic standards but possessed of a strange vitality she found intriguing. No energy weapons, no faster-than-light travel until very recently, no genetic modification beyond basic medical applications. Yet the humans had somehow survived and thrived on their isolated planet for thousands of years. "We're pretty new to all this," Marcus admitted, gesturing around the station. "Most species out here have been spacefaring for millennia. We're still figuring out which end is up, honestly." "How did your people make contact with the galaxy?" "Accidentally, mostly. We detected some energy signatures from a Thorgon exploration ship about 5 years ago and sent out a signal. They were pretty surprised to find us, from what I understand. Apparently our corner of the galaxy was supposed to be empty." 5 years. Zara-Th realized that meant humans had emerged into galactic society right around the time her father had been fighting the Nexus invasion. While her empire had been dying, an entirely new species had been taking its first steps into the stars. "What brings you out here?" she asked. Marcus grimaced slightly. "Supply run that went sideways. The company I was supposed to deliver to went out of business while I was in transit. Now I'm stuck with a cargo hold full of Earth electronics that nobody out here knows how to use." "What kind of electronics?" "Communication devices, mostly. Pretty primitive by galactic standards, but they're reliable and cheap to manufacture. I was hoping to find someone interested in low-cost alternatives to the standard equipment." An idea began to form in Zara-Th's mind. During her time as heir to the Empire, she had spent considerable effort studying galactic trade patterns and manufacturing processes. Earth's isolation might actually be an advantage in certain markets. "The frontier colonies," she said suddenly. "What about them?" Your electronics. The frontier colonies might be very interested. They often struggle to afford standard galactic technology, especially for basic communications. If your equipment is truly reliable and inexpensive. Marcus leaned forward, interest evident on his strange, furless features. You know something about trade out there? I've studied commerce patterns extensively, she replied carefully. The key would be finding the right intermediary. Someone the colonists trust, who understands their needs. And, you know someone like that? Zara Th hesitated. This human seemed genuinely kind, but revealing too much about her background could be dangerous. Still, if she was going to survive, she needed to take some risks. I might be able to help you reach the right markets, she said slowly. In exchange for passage to the frontier regions. Marcus studied her for a long moment. You're running from something, aren't you? The directness of the question caught her off guard. In galactic diplomatic circles, such a blunt inquiry would be considered incredibly rude. But there was no malice in Marcus's voice, only honest curiosity. Yes, she admitted. Legal troubles? Political troubles. Marcus nodded as if that explained everything. Politicians and their families always seem to be the ones who get thrown under the transport when things go bad. Are you in actual danger, or just persona non grata? The latter, I think. I hope. Well, I could use someone who knows how to navigate galactic politics. And if you can really help me find buyers for this cargo, it would solve both our problems. You're willing to trust me? Just like that? Marcus shrugged. My grandmother always said you can judge people by how they treat service workers and how they handle bad luck. You've been sitting here for 2 hours without being rude to a single station employee, despite clearly having the worst day of your life. That's good enough for me. The simple generosity of the gesture left Zara Th momentarily speechless. In her 28 years of life, every relationship had been calculated, every interaction had carried political implications. The idea that someone might offer assistance based purely on instinct and goodwill was almost incomprehensible. I don't even know your full name, Marcus continued. And you don't know mine. But sometimes that's exactly what makes partnerships work. No preconceptions, no baggage from previous dealings. My name is Zara Th, she said quietly. And I would be grateful for the chance to help you succeed. They shook hands in the human custom Marcus explained, his warm skin a sharp contrast to her naturally cool touch. It was the first positive physical contact she had experienced since Captain Theron's farewell embrace. Marcus's ship turned out to be a compact but well-maintained vessel of human design. The technology was indeed primitive by galactic standards, but everything was clean, functional, and cleverly arranged. He gave her a small cabin normally used for storing non-essential supplies, apologizing for the cramped conditions. It's perfect, she assured him, and meant it. After 3 sleepless nights on station benches, the narrow bunk seemed luxurious. As they departed Omega-7 and entered hyperspace for the frontier regions, Zara Th stood in the ship's tiny observation lounge, watching the stars stretch into lines of light. For the first time since the Council's judgment, she felt something that might have been hope. She had lost an empire, but perhaps she had found something else. Something she had never truly possessed before. A friend. The journey to the frontier would take 12 days, more than enough time to plan their approach to the colonial markets. Marcus had shared his cargo manifests and technical specifications with remarkable openness, trusting her completely despite knowing almost nothing about her background. That trust, Zara Th decided, was something worth protecting. Whatever else happened, she would not betray the faith this unusual human had shown her. Outside the viewports, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the rise and fall of empires. But, for the first time in days, Zara Th found herself looking forward to tomorrow. The frontier colony of New Haven appeared on their screens like a jewel scattered across 3 connected asteroids. Makeshift bridges and atmospheric tunnels linked the rocky outposts, creating a settlement that looked both precarious and determined. Ships of various sizes and origins docked at the external ports, their hulls bearing the wear marks of hard travel through uncharted space. Marcus guided his vessel toward the main docking platform with practiced ease. What do you think? He asked Zara Th, who stood beside him studying the readings. It's perfect, she replied, noting the mix of vessel types. Independent traders, modified civilian craft, and several ships that appeared to be converted military surplus. These people value functionality over appearances. Your electronics should appeal to them. During their 12-day journey, Zara Th had learned more about human technology than she had ever expected. Marcus was not just a simple trader, she discovered, but an engineer who had helped design much of the equipment they carried. His people's approach to problem-solving fascinated her. Where galactic technology emphasized efficiency and power, human designs prioritized reliability and ease of repair. The key insight, she had told him on the third day, is that frontier colonists cannot afford equipment that requires specialized maintenance. They need devices that a generalist technician can service with basic tools. That's exactly what we built, Marcus had replied enthusiastically. Everything in that cargo hold can be repaired with standard components and basic circuitry knowledge. Now, watching the bustling activity around New Haven's docks, Zara Th felt confident in their prospects. Her years of studying colonial economics had not been wasted. The docking process took longer than expected as traffic control directed them through a complex approach pattern designed to avoid several mining operations. Marcus handled the delays with good humor, chatting amiably with the controllers and even offering technical advice when one of them mentioned problems with their communication array. You've got signal degradation in your third relay, Marcus observed, studying the readings. Probably moisture buildup in the coupling connections. Try cycling power through the backup channels while you clean the contacts. How'd you know that? Came the surprised response. We deal with similar problems on Earth. Hostile environments are tough on electronics everywhere, I guess. 20 minutes later, the controller reported that Marcus's suggestion had solved their problem. Thanks, Earthship. Your docking fees are waived for today. Zara Th watched this exchange with growing appreciation. Marcus had just demonstrated exactly the kind of practical knowledge that frontier colonists valued most, the ability to solve immediate problems with simple solutions. As they secured their ship and began unloading sample equipment, a small crowd gathered to examine the human technology. Word had apparently spread quickly about the helpful Earth trader who had fixed the station's communications. Simple, sturdy design, observed a grizzled Thargan engineer, turning one of the communication units over in his 4 hands. No unnecessary complexity. How's the range? 15 kilometers in atmosphere, 50 in vacuum, Marcus replied. Not impressive by galactic standards, but completely reliable in most conditions. And repair requirements? Basic electronic skills. All components are modular and clearly labeled. Average repair time for major failures is under 20 minutes. The engineer's expression shifted to surprise. 20 minutes? For major failures? Most of our technicians aren't specialists, Marcus explained. We had to design everything for quick, simple maintenance. A small blue-skinned woman pushed forward through the crowd. Her clothing marked her as colony administration. I'm Director Chen, no relation, I assume, she said with a slight smile. What's your pricing structure? Marcus glanced at Zara Th, who gave him a barely perceptible nod. They had discussed pricing strategy extensively during the journey. We're looking for long-term partnerships rather than quick profits, Marcus said. Our initial pricing reflects bulk purchase discounts and includes comprehensive technical support. Director Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. Technical support? My partner here has extensive experience with frontier colony operations, Marcus continued smoothly. We can provide installation guidance, maintenance training, and ongoing consultation. It was a stretch of the truth, but not technically false. Zara Th's knowledge of colonial economics definitely qualified as experience with frontier operations, even if that experience had been gained from imperial planning sessions rather than hands-on work. The demonstration that followed exceeded their best expectations. Marcus had brought along several different communication devices, a portable power management system, and what he called a diagnostic toolkit, a collection of simple instruments designed to identify and troubleshoot common equipment problems. This is brilliant, murmured a young technician, examining the diagnostic tools. Look at this, you can test circuit integrity, power flow, signal clarity, and connection quality with one device. Our people developed it out of necessity, Marcus explained. When you're working alone in remote areas, you need to be able to diagnose problems quickly. The colony's senior engineer, a methodical aquatic domain representative working in a mobility suit, conducted thorough tests on each device. The results consistently met or exceeded Marcus's specifications. Impressive reliability tolerances, the engineer admitted grudgingly. Your error correction protocols are particularly elegant. Simple but effective. As the morning progressed, it became clear that word was spreading throughout the colony. Representatives from other settlements in the system began arriving via shuttle to examine the human technology. By afternoon, they had inquiries from 12 different colonies. We weren't expecting this level of interest so quickly, Director Chen confided during a brief lull in the demonstrations. Usually it takes weeks to evaluate new suppliers. Is that a problem? Zara TH asked carefully. On the contrary. We've been struggling with communication reliability across our entire system for months. Standard galactic equipment either breaks down constantly in our environment or costs more than our yearly technology budget. This was exactly what Zara TH had hoped to hear. What specific environmental challenges are you facing? Director Chen's expression grew more serious. High radiation zones from solar activity, electromagnetic interference from the asteroid mining operations, and temperature variations that play havoc with standard electronics. Most suppliers refuse to guarantee their equipment under these conditions. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Our gear is designed for challenging environments. Earth has some pretty hostile regions, and our equipment needs to work everywhere from Arctic research stations to desert mining operations. You're willing to guarantee performance under our conditions? Absolutely. If any device fails due to environmental factors within the first year, we'll replace it at no charge. The bold promise made Zara TH nervous, but Marcus seemed completely confident. During their journey, he had explained that human engineers always built in substantial safety margins precisely to ensure such guarantees could be honored. By evening, they had preliminary agreements with 8 colonies for initial equipment orders. The quantities involved would completely exhaust Marcus's current cargo and require substantial additional shipments from Earth. I'll need to contact my company for expanded production, Marcus told the group of colony representatives who had gathered for final negotiations. How soon do you need delivery? Our communications breakdown is getting critical, admitted the representative from the mining colony of Deep Rock. We're currently using backup systems that fail more often than they work. 6 weeks for the first major shipment, Marcus promised. Emergency supplies within 2 weeks if you can provide a transport. That evening, as they sat in New Haven's community center sharing a meal with the colonists, Zara TH reflected on how dramatically her circumstances had changed. A month ago, she had commanded the resources of 17 worlds. Now she was helping to arrange trade deals for basic communication equipment, and somehow this felt far more meaningful than anything she had done as a princess. You know, Director Chen said, settling down beside them with her meal, we're always looking for qualified consultants to help with expansion planning. Someone with your knowledge of colonial economics would be valuable. The casual offer hit Zara TH like a physical blow. Employment. Legitimate, meaningful work that would use her actual skills and knowledge. After weeks of rejection and increasing desperation, the possibility seemed almost too good to be true. I'd be very interested in discussing that, she managed to say calmly. Excellent. We can talk details tomorrow, but I'm thinking a consulting contract focused on supply chain optimization and trade route development. The pay isn't spectacular by galactic standards, but it includes full residency status and colony benefits. A place to belong. Work that mattered. The chance to build something new instead of inheriting something ancient. That sounds perfect, Zara TH said, and meant it completely. Later that evening, as she and Marcus walked through the colony's residential sections, she found herself amazed by the sense of community that permeated everything. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of imperial society, the colonists seemed to function through cooperation and mutual support. Children from a dozen different species played together in the common areas while their parents shared childcare duties. Engineering problems were solved through group brainstorming sessions. Resource allocation decisions were made by consensus rather than decree. It's not perfect, Marcus observed, following her gaze. They have their share of conflicts and personality clashes. But, when everyone's survival depends on working together, people tend to find ways to make it work. My people could have learned from this, Zarath said quietly. Your people? She realized she had revealed more than intended. The business empire I mentioned. We were always focused on control and efficiency. But, this is stronger than anything we built. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes the best structures grow organically instead of being imposed from above. They paused at an observation window overlooking the main community area. Dozens of species were represented in the evening's activities, formal council meetings, informal social gatherings, educational sessions for children and adults alike. It was chaotic and noisy and completely wonderful. I've never seen anything like this, Zarath admitted. Really? I thought galactic civilization would be full of places like this. Galactic civilization is usually much more segregated. Species tend to stick to their own territories, their own stations, their own communities. This level of integration is unusual. Is that better or worse? Zarath considered the question carefully. Different. Safer, perhaps, but also lonelier. You lose something when you only interact with beings who think exactly like you do. That's part of why I volunteered for this trading mission, Marcus said. Earth is still learning how to fit into the larger galaxy. We need to understand what's out here before we decide how much we want to be part of it. And, what have you concluded so far? Marcus grinned. That the galaxy is enormous and complicated and full of people trying their best to make good lives for themselves and their families. Pretty much like home, just with more variety in the people. The simple wisdom of the observation struck Zarath profoundly. Marcus saw the galaxy not as a collection of competing powers and political entities, but as a community of individuals with common hopes and struggles. It was a perspective her imperial upbringing had never allowed her to develop. That night, as she lay in her small but comfortable guest quarters, Zarath found herself thinking about the future for the first time in weeks. Not the grand future she had been trained to inherit, but a practical, personal future built through her own efforts and choices. Tomorrow she would begin negotiating her consulting contract with the colony. She would help Marcus arrange expanded production and shipping for his company's electronics. She would start building a new life based on her own skills and merit rather than inherited status. It would not be easy. Frontier life offered challenges that imperial privilege had never prepared her for. But, as she drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the gentle sounds of a living community, Zarath felt something she had never experienced before. Complete, honest contentment with her place in the universe. The next morning brought unexpected complications. A sleek Thorgon military vessel had arrived during the night and was requesting permission to dock. Director Chen's expression was grim as she briefed Marcus and Zarath over breakfast. They're asking specifically about irregular trade activities and want to inspect all off-world cargo, she explained. This isn't entirely unusual. The Thorgon Confederacy claims jurisdiction over frontier trade regulation, but the timing seems suspicious. Zarath felt ice forming in her stomach. If the Thorgans were investigating human trade activities, it could only be because someone had reported unusual circumstances surrounding her presence here. But who would have done so, and why? What's our legal situation? Marcus asked calmly. Technically solid, Director Chen replied. All your documentation is in order, and frontier colonies have broad autonomy over trade relationships. But the Thorgans can make things very difficult if they choose to. Then, we'll be completely cooperative and professional, Marcus decided. We have nothing to hide. Zarath admired his confidence, but her own situation was considerably more complicated. If the Thorgans ran detailed identity scans on everyone present during the inspection, her royal genetics would immediately trigger alerts throughout the galactic security network. I should probably make myself scarce during the inspection, she said carefully. Why? Marcus asked, genuine confusion evident in his voice. Those political troubles I mentioned.
Better to avoid any complications. Director Chen studied her closely. How serious are these political troubles? Serious enough that I'd rather not test Thorgon bureaucracy's tolerance for complexity.
It was not entirely honest, but not entirely false either. Director Chen clearly sensed there was more to the story, but she nodded acceptance. There's a maintenance tunnel system that connects to the mining operations on Asteroid 2, she said quietly.
You could stay there during the inspection.
It would be unofficial, of course.
I understand. And I appreciate it.
Marcus looked troubled by this development, but he did not press for details.
Will you be safe? Safer than if I'm here when they arrive.
An hour later, Zarath found herself crawling through access tunnels that were clearly never intended for extended occupation. The mining operations on Asteroid 2 were automated, requiring only periodic human supervision. She settled into a control booth overlooking the extraction equipment and prepared to wait. Through the maintenance network's communication system, she could monitor the general station chatter. The Thorgon inspection team had arrived and was conducting what appeared to be routine examinations of cargo and documentation. Marcus was cooperating fully, demonstrating his equipment and answering technical questions with patience and expertise. Everything seemed to be proceeding normally until she heard Director Chen's voice over the comm system, speaking carefully controlled words. The inspection team is asking about recent arrivals who might not be properly documented.
Zarath's blood chilled.
This was not a trade inspection at all, it was a manhunt. Someone had reported her presence, and the Thorgans were here specifically to find her.
But who could have known?
She had been careful to use only her shortened name and had avoided any behavior that might reveal her true identity.
Unless the realization hit her like a physical blow. Her genetic signature.
When she had applied for those crew positions at Omega 7, her rejection letters had included standard security clearance denials.
Those clearance checks would have revealed her full identity to anyone with access to galactic security databases. Someone had been tracking her movements through the employment application system.
Over the comm, she heard Marcus asking pointed questions about the inspection team's legal authority and specific mandate. His tone was polite but increasingly firm as he pressed for details about what they were actually searching for. We have reports of an unregistered individual with possible connections to war crimes, came the Thorgon officer's reply. This individual may be traveling under false documentation and seeking employment in frontier regions.
War crimes?
Marcus's voice carried genuine shock.
What kind of war crimes? Classified information.
We need to examine identification records for all recent arrivals and conduct detailed scans of anyone who fits the subject profile. Zarath closed her eyes, feeling the weight of inevitability settling over her. She could stay hidden in the maintenance tunnels, but that would only delay discovery while putting the entire colony at risk. If the Thorgans expanded their search, they would eventually find her, and her presence would be seen as evidence that the colonists had been harboring a fugitive. The people of New Haven had shown her nothing but kindness and acceptance. She could not repay that by bringing galactic security forces down on their community. But before she could act on her decision to surrender, Marcus's voice came through the comm again, sharp with anger. You're talking about Princess Zarath of the Valkyrian Empire.
The admission sent shockwaves through Zarath's entire body.
Somehow, Marcus had figured out her true identity.
You know this individual, the Thorgon officer demanded. I know of her.
Everyone who follows galactic politics knows of her.
Her father committed war crimes, not her. She was stripped of all titles and exiled by the Galactic Council.
What possible authority do you have to pursue someone who has already been judged and punished by the highest legal body in known space? The challenge was both brilliant and dangerous. Marcus was using her royal background as protection rather than liability, pointing out that she had already faced official justice and demanding to know why the Thorgans thought they had authority to supersede the Council's judgment. The Council's judgment covered political matters, the officer replied stiffly. Criminal investigation authority remains with individual species security forces.
What crimes has she personally committed? That information is classified.
Then, you have no legal authority to detain or question anyone without formal charges and proper documentation, Director Chen's voice cut in. Frontier colonies operate under expanded due process protections specifically to prevent fishing expeditions by outside security forces. The legal argument continued for another 20 minutes, with Marcus and Director Chen systematically dismantling every justification the Thorgans offered for their search. It became increasingly clear that the inspection team had arrived without proper authorization, hoping to locate Zara TH through intimidation and bureaucratic pressure rather than legitimate legal process. Finally, the lead Thorgan officer admitted defeat. We will return with proper documentation for any future searches. You do that, Marcus replied coolly. And, next time, try reading Frontier Colony legal statutes before you arrive. An hour after the Thorgan ship departed, Zara TH emerged from the maintenance tunnels to find Marcus waiting for her in the control booth. His expression was serious but not angry. Princess Zara TH of the Valkyrian Empire, he said quietly. That's who I've been traveling with for the past 2 weeks. Yes, she replied, seeing no point in continued deception. Daughter of the man who destroyed 3 worlds to stop the Nexus invasion. Yes. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Do you agree with what he did? The question was harder to answer than she had expected. I understand why he did it. The Nexus would have consumed everything in their path. But, I also understand that 40 billion beings died because of his decision. That's not what I asked. Do you think he was right? Zara TH took a deep breath. I think he was faced with an impossible choice and made the decision he believed would save the most lives. I think he was probably wrong. And, I think the guilt of it killed him just as surely as any tribunal would have. Marcus nodded slowly. And, that's why you lost everything. Because you couldn't condemn your own father publicly, even when you disagreed with his actions privately. How did you figure it out? Little things, mostly. Your knowledge of galactic politics was too detailed and current for someone who had just lost a business empire. Your mannerisms were too formal for a merchant family. And then, there was your reaction when we talked about Earth's accidental first contact with the Thorgans 5 years ago. You looked like you were remembering something specific from that time period. Why didn't you turn me in? Marcus's expression softened slightly. Because I've spent 2 weeks getting to know you as a person, not as a political symbol. You've been honest about everything that matters. You've worked harder than anyone to make our trading mission successful. And, you've never once acted like the universe owes you special treatment because of who you used to be. The simple acceptance in his voice brought tears to Zara TH's eyes. After months of rejection and suspicion, someone finally saw her as herself rather than as her father's daughter. Besides, Marcus added with a slight smile, my grandmother also used to say that you should judge people by how they handle losing everything. You've handled it with more grace and dignity than most people handle ordinary setbacks. What happens now? Now we finish what we started. You help me establish a successful trading relationship with the frontier colonies, and I help you build a new life based on your own accomplishments. Unless you'd rather be somewhere else? Zara TH looked around the control booth, thinking about the community she had glimpsed in New Haven, the meaningful work Director Chen had offered, and the simple friendship Marcus had shown her. No, she said firmly. This is exactly where I want to be. 6 months later, Zara TH stood in the command center of New Haven's expanded communications hub, watching data streams flow between 12 different colony systems in real time. The transformation had been remarkable. What had started as a simple trade deal for human electronics had evolved into the foundation of an entirely new kind of civilization. Incoming transmission from the Deep Rock Mining Consortium, announced Kira, the young Thargan technician who had become Zara TH's primary assistant. They're reporting a 30% increase in extraction efficiency since implementing the new coordination protocols. Excellent. Route that to the efficiency analysis database and send copies to the other mining operations. The database in question had not existed 6 months ago. It was one of dozens of collaborative information systems that Zara TH had helped establish as part of her consulting work with the frontier colonies. Instead of each settlement struggling with problems in isolation, they now shared solutions, resources, and expertise across the entire network. Marcus's human electronics had been the catalyst,
but the real revolution had come from Zara-TH's understanding of large-scale organizational systems. She had taken the cooperative spirit she observed in New Haven and scaled it up, creating institutional frameworks that allowed dozens of independent colonies to function as a unified civilization while maintaining their individual autonomy. Director Zara-TH, Kara corrected herself automatically. The young Thargon was one of several colonists who knew about Zara-TH's background, but she still occasionally slipped into old habits of formal address. "Just Zara-TH is fine," she replied with amusement. The correction had become routine over the past few months as word of her identity had gradually spread throughout the colony network. To her surprise, most colonists had reacted with curiosity rather than hostility. Many were political refugees themselves, or descendants of refugees, and they understood that current actions mattered more than past associations. "Director Marcus is requesting a conference link from the Terran Pride," Kara announced. "He's approaching the Sol System jump point. Put him through to my office." Zara-TH walked through the communications center toward her private workspace, acknowledging greetings and status reports from the dozen technicians monitoring various colonial operations. The center had grown from a single room to an entire floor of New Haven's central asteroid, becoming the nervous system of what some were calling the Frontier Confederation. Her office was small but comfortable, with viewing screens showing real-time status updates from member colonies and a workstation where she handled the endless stream of consultation requests that arrived daily. What made the space special, however, was the collection of gifts and tokens that covered one entire wall: thank you notes from colonists whose problems she had helped solve, mineral samples from successful mining operations she had planned, photographs of new settlements that had been established using her organizational frameworks. It was a far cry from the formal portraits and imperial artifacts that had decorated her chambers on Valkyria Prime, but it meant infinitely more to her. Marcus's face appeared on the main screen, his expression animated with excitement. "Zara-TH. You should see what's happening here. Earth's government has approved a massive expansion of the Colonial Support Program. We're looking at regular supply runs, technical support missions, and formal diplomatic recognition for the Frontier Confederation." "That's wonderful news. What changed their minds?" "The economic analysis you prepared made all the difference. When they saw the resource extraction rates and trait potential you've documented, suddenly, everyone wanted to be part of the expansion effort." The economic analysis had been one of Zara-TH's most challenging projects, a comprehensive evaluation of the frontier region's potential that drew on everything she had learned about galactic commerce and resource management. She had worked for weeks to present the data in terms that Earth's government would understand and appreciate. Any resistance from the established galactic powers? Some grumbling from the Thorgon Confederacy about territorial boundaries, but nothing official. "Apparently, your legal research on frontier autonomy rights has made it very difficult for them to challenge our activities." That legal research had been necessitated by continued Thorgon pressure over the past months. While they had never returned with proper authorization to search for Zara-TH specifically, they had made several attempts to establish regulatory authority over frontier trade activities. Each time, Zara-TH's detailed understanding of galactic law had provided the colonies with ironclad defenses. "How long until you reach Earth?" 3 days. I'll be spending 2 weeks there briefing the expansion committee and helping to plan the next phase of operations. Then, I'll head back with the first official diplomatic mission. I'll have the reception protocols ready." After ending the call, Zara-TH returned to her data analysis work. The Frontier Confederation now included 47 independent settlements across 8 star systems, and each one generated constant streams of information about resource availability, population growth, technological needs, and trade opportunities. Her job was to identify patterns and optimization opportunities that would benefit the entire network. It was exactly the kind of large-scale strategic thinking she had been trained for as Imperial heir, but applied to building something new rather than maintaining something ancient. And, unlike her royal duties, this work produced immediate, tangible benefits for real people facing real challenges. "Director?" Kara's voice came through the intercom. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Galactic Council headquarters." Zara-TH's blood chilled. Official communications from the Council had been her greatest fear during the early months of her exile. "Route it to my office."
The transmission carried the formal seals of the Council's diplomatic corps, not a legal summons or criminal investigation, but official governmental business. The speaker was Chancellor Morvac himself, the same Thorgon who had pronounced her empire's dissolution 6 months earlier. This message is directed to Princess Zarath of the former Valkyrian territories, his recorded voice announced. Recent reports indicate that you have established significant organizational authority within the frontier colonial regions. The Galactic Council wishes to discuss formal recognition of these territories and your potential role in representing their interests. Zarath stared at the screen in shock. Formal recognition? Representation? After months of exile and political persecution, the Council was suddenly interested in diplomatic relations? The message continued, your expertise in large-scale governance and your current position within the frontier communities make you a logical candidate for official ambassadorial status. Please respond at your earliest convenience to arrange preliminary discussions. She replayed the message 3 times, searching for hidden threats or political traps. But the language was straightforward diplomatic protocol, a genuine offer of recognition and, possibly even restoration of political status. Kira, she called through the intercom. Schedule a full staff meeting for this afternoon. We need to discuss some significant developments. The staff meeting filled New Haven's main conference room with representatives from every major colony in the Confederation. Director Chen was present in person, along with the senior administrators from 8 other settlements. The remaining colonies participated via real-time communication links. Zarath had debated how much to reveal about the Council's message, but had ultimately decided that complete transparency was essential. These people had trusted her with their future, they deserved to know about any development that might affect her ability to serve their interests. The Galactic Council has extended an informal offer of recognition for the Frontier Confederation as an autonomous political entity, she announced. They're also suggesting that I might serve as official ambassador to represent your interests in Council proceedings. The response was immediate and mixed. Some representatives were excited by the prospect of official recognition and the protection it would provide against interference from individual species governments. Others were suspicious of Council motives and worried about losing the independence they had worked so hard to establish. What would formal recognition mean for our autonomy? Asked Director Hale from the mining collective at Deep Rock. That would depend on the specific terms negotiated, Zarath replied honestly. Council recognition typically provides protection against external interference in exchange for adherence to basic galactic legal standards. It shouldn't affect internal governance or economic policies. And your role as ambassador? If I accepted such a position, it would formalize what I'm already doing, representing your collective interests in dealing with galactic political structures. The main difference would be official diplomatic status and legal protections. Director Chan leaned forward. What are your personal feelings about this offer? It was the question Zarath had been dreading. Her personal feelings were complicated, involving years of political training, months of exile and hardship, and the deep satisfaction she had found in her current work. 6 months ago, I would have seen this as vindication and an opportunity to reclaim my political status, she said slowly. Today, I see it as recognition of what we've built together and a chance to protect it from outside interference. My priority is not personal advancement, but ensuring that the Confederation continues to thrive. But you do want the ambassadorship, pressed Representative Thorne from the agricultural settlement at Green Valley. I want to serve your interests in whatever capacity provides the most benefit. If that means formal diplomatic status, then yes. If it means declining the Council's offer and maintaining our current independence, then I'm equally committed to that path. The discussion continued for 3 hours, covering everything from specific diplomatic protocols to long-term expansion plans. By the end, a consensus had emerged, they would engage with the Council's offer, but on their own terms. Draft a response indicating our willingness to discuss recognition, Director Chen suggested. But make it clear that any agreement must preserve our internal autonomy and respect our existing governmental structures. And my potential ambassadorship? Accept the offer, conditional on Council acceptance of our terms for recognition, Representative Thorne decided. You've earned our trust, and we need someone who understands both galactic politics and our local needs. That evening, as Zara Th worked on drafting the response to Chancellor Morvek, she reflected on how dramatically her understanding of leadership had changed. 6 months ago, authority had meant inheriting power and commanding obedience. Now it meant earning trust and serving others' needs. The message she finally sent was carefully crafted to express confidence without arrogance, interest without desperation. She emphasized the Confederation's achievements and made it clear that any diplomatic recognition would be a partnership between equals, not a grant of legitimacy from superior to subordinate. 3 days later, Chancellor Morvek's response arrived with surprising speed. The Council was prepared to begin formal negotiations immediately, and preliminary terms were remarkably favorable. The Frontier Confederation would receive full recognition as an autonomous political entity with internal governance authority, external trade rights, and protection against territorial expansion by established powers. In exchange, they would agree to basic galactic legal standards regarding sentient rights, environmental protection, and conflict resolution. Zara Th would be granted full ambassadorial status with diplomatic immunity and the authority to represent Confederation interests in all Council proceedings. "They're giving us almost everything we could want," Marcus observed via communication link from Earth. "What's the catch?" "No catch that I can identify," Zara Th replied. "Just intelligent politics. The Council has been dealing with frontier expansion pressures for decades. Establishing formal frameworks for colonial autonomy serves their interests as much as ours." "And your ambassadorship? Honestly? I think they're more comfortable dealing with someone who understands their procedures and protocols. My imperial background is an advantage in this context, not a liability." The formal negotiations took 6 weeks, conducted via real-time communication links between New Haven and Council headquarters. Zara Th found herself drawing on every aspect of her political education as she worked through complex questions of jurisdiction, legal authority, and diplomatic procedure. The process was exhausting but exhilarating. For the first time since her exile, she was using her complete skill set in service of goals she genuinely believed in. This was not maintaining inherited power, but building something new and valuable through careful planning and principled negotiation. When the final agreement was signed, 47 colonies across 8 star systems officially became the Frontier Confederation, with Zara Th serving as their first ambassador to the Galactic Council. The ceremony took place simultaneously across all member settlements, connected by the communication networks that had started with Marcus's simple electronics trade and grown into the foundation of an interstellar civilization. Zara Th stood in New Haven's community center, surrounded by beings from dozens of species who had become her friends, colleagues, and partners in building something unprecedented. 6 months ago, she said to the assembled crowd, "I came here with nothing but a failing identity and uncertain future. You offered me friendship, purpose, and the chance to prove my worth through honest work. Today, we celebrate not just formal recognition of our confederation, but the validation of principles that too much of the galaxy has forgotten, that cooperation builds more than competition, that diversity strengthens rather than weakens, and that the value of leadership lies in service rather than dominance." The speech was broadcast live to all member colonies and simultaneously transmitted to Earth, where Marcus was attending similar ceremonies with human colonists. It was also transmitted to Galactic Council headquarters, where it would become part of the official record. But, for Zara Th, the most meaningful moment came afterward, when the formal proceedings ended and the celebration became personal. Colonists approached to thank her for specific help she had provided, to share stories about how the Confederation had changed their lives, and to express their hopes for the future they were building together. Director Chen was among the last to speak with her. "Any regrets about losing your empire?" Zara Th looked around the community center at the diverse crowd of beings who had chosen to build their lives together despite differences in species, background, and original homeworld. She thought about the collaborative projects, the shared challenges, and the sense of common purpose that energized everything they accomplished. "No regrets," she said finally. "I lost an empire built on inheritance and maintained through control. But I helped build something better, a confederation founded on choice and sustained through cooperation. This is worth more than anything I gave up." Later that evening, as the celebration wound down and the colonists dispersed to their homes and workstations, Zara-TH remained in the community center's observation area, looking out at the stars that now contained 47 worlds where beings were going to sleep secure in their freedom and optimistic about their future. Her personal communication device chimed with an incoming message from Marcus, who was still on Earth coordinating the human government's expanded support for colonial development.
"Congratulations, Madam Ambassador," his message read.
"My grandmother would have said that you've proven the truth of her favorite saying, that you can judge people by how they handle losing everything, and by what they choose to build when they get the chance to start over." Zara-TH smiled, remembering the human grandmother's wisdom that Marcus had shared during their first meeting. She thought about the journey that had brought her from an imperial throne room to this community center, from inherited authority to earned trust. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, diplomatic complexities, administrative responsibilities, and the constant work of maintaining cooperation among 47 independent colonies. But tonight, she was content to sit quietly and appreciate what they had accomplished. She had lost everything that had been given to her, but she had found something far more valuable, a purpose worth serving and people worth serving it for. Outside the viewports, the stars shone with the same ancient light that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. But among them now were the lights of human ships carrying supplies and support to frontier colonies, of communication relays connecting distant settlements, and of mining operations that would provide resources for continued expansion. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, but it was also full of individuals trying to build good lives for themselves and their families. That truth, which Marcus had recognized immediately and which Zara-TH had learned through loss and exile, would be the foundation for everything they built in the future.
The Frontier Confederation was no longer just a collection of struggling colonies.
It was proof that cooperation could triumph over competition, that diversity created strength rather than weakness, and that the best leaders were those who served others rather than commanding them. It was, Zara-TH realized, exactly the kind of empire worth building.